Good evening, everyone. I hope you're doing well. In my previous video, which on YouTube is linked below as a related video, I talked about the bad inflation numbers and how government misreports inflation, to put it politely. And in this video, I wanted to show you how governments run up lots of debt, and then they tell you, hey, in 10 years' time, we're going to pay off the debt, we're going to stop accumulating debt. The Australian government at all three levels has over $2,000 billion of gross debt. And we'll have a look at what they thought it was going to be 20 years ago, because right now, if we go to the financial review, we can see that there's been a $57 billion quote black hole in Chalmers' budget due to higher hospital payments to the states. So the healthcare spending from the government is mathematically bankrupting us. It's costing a fortune. It's running up debt. It's causing inflation and other unexplained spending increases. In the interest of time, I was briefly run over this, but the Australian GDP, I believe, is roughly $2,600 billion. So the current plan, on top of the $2,000 billion of debt we already have, the current plan is even in 5 years' time, the government will be borrowing 1.5% of GDP, which would be about $40 billion per year. So they're just going to keep adding the debt on top. But of course, they tell you in 10 years' time, by financial year 2036, we'll effectively be borrowing just a tiny bit of money. We're going to stop borrowing the money. Well, how did that work out in the past? I'm looking at the Parliamentary Budget Office to get the current numbers as accurately as I possibly can. From official sources. And then if we look at the 2007 intergenerational report from the Australian government Treasury website, and I've argued with Google Gemini for about an hour trying to get these numbers correct, because I do understand some of the data and I wanted to make sure it was presented to you correctly. Firstly, when Howard and Costello were in power, I believe 2007 was their last year, they thought federal spending would be 375 billion. Whoopsie, it's 734 billion, about double what they thought it was going to be. They thought the Australian government would be at the federal level 20% of the economy. The federal government is 26% of the economy, so it's a much larger percentage of the economy. They thought healthcare spending would be about $100 billion. Of course, there was no NDIS then. Healthcare spending is $166 billion. Whoopsie, it's 66% more than they thought it was going to be. That's quite a chunk of change. But the number I really want to focus on too is this number down the bottom here, the debt. If you look at what they thought roughly 20 years ago, they actually thought we would have zero debt. They thought government was going to pay down debt, which is what Chalmers is saying now. He's saying, well, in 10 years' time, we'll stop borrowing money. Well, 20 years ago, they thought we'd pay down the debt. How did that work out? Do we have zero debt? No, we have nearly $2,200 billion of gross Australian government debt. So when politicians say we'll pay down the debt later, have a look at how that works out.